we're going to speak a little bit about wellness. What does it mean to be well? And I want to start off by telling you a story. Nobody knows if this particular story actually happened or whether it was a fable or just a myth that started out, but it's in the Dark Ages, around 500 years after Christ. A man walks into a village with a rock. And as he walks into the village with a rock, he walks right up to the Times Square of this village. He holds up the rock and proclaims it to be a magic rock. He says, "This magic rock of mine is a rock that can make soup. This is a magic rock because this rock is a soup rock." You've never seen a rock like this ever before in your life. This particular rock, if you use it correctly, this rock can become soup. So everybody around town starts heckling him, saying there's no way. He says, well, let me prove it to you. Right here in the town square, let's build a fire, bring me a pot, bring me some water. I'll show you how I make soup out of this rock. So they humor him. They bring the pot, they make the fire, they do the whole thing. When the water comes to a boil, he takes the rock and with great pomp and ceremony, he throws it into the boiling water. And he says, rock becomes soup. And so he has the whole town looking at the boiling water. And as they're all staring at the water, they ask him, so how long does this take? And he says, well, it depends. It's sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. You can't rush magic. So they're standing around, and he says, last time I did this in the town just down the road, we added some vegetables, and it really added a lot to the flavor of the soup. So somebody in town says, well, I've got vegetables. He says, bring it, let's put it in there. So they take the vegetables, they put it in, and everybody's staring at the pot. And he says, you'll never believe this, but there's some places that are so affluent that they even put meat with this rock soup. And it really just takes the taste to a whole nother level. But I know this town can't afford much meat. So somebody said, well, I've got meat. I'll bring you some meat. So they put meat in the soup. And then he made some comment about spices. And he made some comment about some other vegetables. And lo and behold, pretty soon they had soup. So when they had soup, he dug through the soup. And he found the rock. And he took out the rock. And he said, this is a magic rock. Behold the soup from the rock. And the town was very impressed. Just like you are. Fact of the matter is that in life, we're constantly making rock soup. We're trying to find the ingredients to a whole life. We're trying to find the ingredients to a complete life. We keep on seeing things and thinking, if only I have that, then I'll be lifing. If only I get this, then I'll truly be alive. This will complete me. This will make me. That thing will fill my life. If only I could find my significant other, that would change everything. Or if only we could have kids, that would make everything better. Or if only this would change, or that would change, or I could find another job, or there's another zero added to my salary. If only that would happen, if only we could add that to my life, then we'll be really making some soup. Then it would really look the way it should. What are the ingredients of a whole life? What are the ingredients of somebody that is well? What does it mean to be well? Essentially, if you look at wellness, you'll find that wellness has these different components. The first component to wellness is wellness within yourself. It's your emotional wellness. Now, wellness is a very hip thing in this day and age. Everybody's speaking about being well. What does it mean to be well? And there's wellness centers, and wellness is an in word right now. But emotional wellness is important. It's important that you're well within yourself. How well are you doing with regards to your emotions? The second area of wellness is wellness with regards to others. Each and every one of us has a level of relational wellness. Our relationships with others, being loved and loving others, forgiveness, family, that whole process. But also, our lives aren't just our emotions or ourselves and those around us. We all have a work. Our work wellness is important in life. Our productive significance. Are you making a productive, significant difference to this world? We've all been wired to feel as if we're doing something of meaning, something that is worth me. How well are you doing with regards to your work life? And then the fourth component of wellness will be your health. It's wellness with regards to your life balance. How are you doing with the balance between work and exercise and all these different things? And when we're talking wellness, we're talking all of these different things. And I don't know if it's that way in your life, but sometimes these things are in competition in my life. Sometimes my effort to find productive significance and to make a difference in the world doesn't do well to my work-life balance, and I don't get around to exercising. Or in my effort to exercise, I don't get around to the family. And then in my process to getting around to everybody else, I end up never getting around to myself, and I start being depressed or I start being down because I don't have enough me time. But then as I struggle to find some me time, I realize, hold on, all this me time is not doing well to my productive significance, and then I end up back unwell again, and it seems like a bit of a dance, doesn't it? A disjointed dance to some extent, I think. Wellness isn't simple. Wellness is hard to come by, and I think sometimes in life we're running this way and that way and the other way to try and add another ingredient to our soup to try and make it whole. If only I could change this, then I'll be whole. Or if only I could change that, then maybe I'll be whole. But what if there was a rock? What if there was a central ingredient that changed it all around? What if there was one ingredient that when that ingredient was in place, it brought everything else together? Now, and our cooking shows are quite popular these days, and some of us are better cooks than others. And this is an important day today. This is an important cooking day. This is the day of the year that Americans will consume more food than any other day, with the exception of Thanksgiving, right? This is Super Bowl Sunday, right? It's a big deal. Some of you have been smoking that brisket for 24 hours. You're preparing for this afternoon. The wings are being marinated. They just need to be cooked. You're ready to put them on the grill as soon as we're done. Now, there's these big days in our lives, and I remember one Christmas, I was asked to do the dessert, and I was given a recipe that cannot fail. Nobody has ever failed it until that day it is. And the reason I failed it was because I just forgot one ingredient. I mean, just one of all the ingredients that I remembered. Nobody in my family remembers the fact that I remembered 9 ingredients. Everybody remembers the fact that I forgot one, the flour. Why is flour so important? But you know what? There's certain core ingredients. There's certain champion ingredients, and without those core ingredients, it doesn't matter how many ingredients you have. If you don't have the core ingredients, it just doesn't work. The same is true when it comes to wellness. There is a core ingredient, a primary ingredient, and the primary ingredient is our spiritual connection. We can have all these other things, and we can struggle with all these other things, but if we don't have our spiritual connection, the core ingredient to what it means to be human beings, if we don't have that connection in place, none of the rest matters. I've met people that have fantastic wellness in all of these areas, but they lack spiritual connectedness, and it doesn't matter how much they have, they're never well, they're never complete, they're never full, because the core ingredient is the core ingredient. It's the thing without which you just don't have a recipe, with which you just don't have a cake. It's the core ingredient. It's the thing you need for wellness. And the thing we need for wellness is what we sang about a moment ago. It's Jesus Christ that came as our cornerstone. And in the Psalms, there's this prophecy about him. And in Psalm 118, verse 22, it says, "The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone." So the stone which was put aside has become the chief cornerstone. Now we build a little different these days, okay? So we build a lot different in the USA. We mostly don't use stones at all, right? It's only cladding on the outside, but for the most part, it's just wood. But in those days, the way they would build a building is they would start with a cornerstone, and they would position the cornerstone, and the cornerstone would be the stone from which every other stone in the building would be laid in relationship to the cornerstone. So if you could imagine for a moment this stone at the beginning of the corner and all the other stones being built out from this cornerstone, which is the primary stone, which is the chief stone. And when this psalm was written, what is written here is it says that this chief stone, this cornerstone, is the foundation of our lives. It's the foundation of who we are. The one that was rejected, that was killed, that was hung on the cross, has become the chief cornerstone, the stone from which every wall has been built. And if you want to imagine for a moment this cornerstone in the middle and the walls being built from it, let me tell you something interesting about this verse. If you look at this verse in the Bible, this chapter is the central chapter to the entire Bible. 594 chapters before, 594 chapters after. The cornerstone. The one from which every other form of wellness grows. And you can never live in the fullness of wellness if your spiritual connection with God is not in place. If you don't have this in place, it doesn't matter what you have in place, you will never experience the fullness of the wellness that God has in mind for us. God's desire is for you to live well, is for you to be well. But your reality might not be that today. Maybe you're listening to me speak this morning, and in your heart, though, if I asked you if you were well, you would say, sure, of course I'm well, I'm doing good. But if we created a quiet moment for you to really consider how you are really doing, you might say that I'm not well. And maybe it's your productive significance, maybe it's your emotions, maybe it's your relational wellness, your relational connectedness to other people. I don't know which area of your life you feel as if you're not well, but if you're not well, I want to tell you that God's desire is for you to live in wellness. God's desire is for you to live in wellness in the midst of a world that isn't well. And to understand that, we've got to understand what is this cornerstone and what does it mean in our lives. To get that, we've got to look at the story of human wellness. We're going to take a moment to just kind of overview this whole thing. So how do we get to human wellness? Well, firstly, we've got to understand that humanity started off well. We were chips off the old block. It's a British saying, which I don't know if it translates, but it's basically to say that we were we were cut from the same cloth. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? We're chips off the old block. We're of the God kind. We have been created well. The story that the rock tells about the wellness that we're in says that we started off when God made Adam and Eve. He didn't make us unwell. He made us perfectly well in every way. I love how John Wesley describes this when he says that man was created as a well-working system. The perfect model of expression of health would be Adam before the fall, a balanced, harmonious human organism designed for immortality. Since the fall, the wholeness to be realized is wholeness within the limits of mortality. So being whole, it wasn't something to aspire to when God made us. He created us whole. Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 51 verse 1 writes about this. He says, listen to me, you who pursue righteousness and seek the Lord. Look at the rock from which you were cut, the quarry from which you were hewn. His statement here is that we've come from the rock. We've come from the wholeness of God. The book of Genesis tells us that we are made in the image and the likeness of God. We started off well. The reality is that God's intent for us was to be whole, to be well, to be complete, to be emotionally well, to be physically well, to be relationally well, to be well with regards to work. In every facet, we've been made to be well. But something happened, something broke, wellness was lost. If you've ever heard about the fall, you would have heard that the rock fell. The man fell from this original idea. The man rejected the image of God. We said that we don't want to live like that. Humanity willfully sinned against God. And in that moment, I'm going to touch on this a little bit next week, but we're going to speak about how in that moment when that happens, what was said was, we shall surely die. And oftentimes, people look at this and say, well, God said if we sin, we'll die, and Adam and Eve were still alive when they sinned, so what's up with that? Well, we die, just not in the sense that we think of. If you take the image of a light bulb, and you take that light bulb and you switch off the light, that light is dead. Though the light bulb is still alive, its primary function is gone. It's dead. It isn't shining anymore. And that's what happened in that moment. This wellness that God created us for, the potential remained, but the power was switched off. The light went from us. Our potential to be well remained, but we weren't well anymore. And if you read the story of humanity from the moment of the fall onwards, what you'll see is brokenness, unwellness. One unwell person making another person unwell, and so forth and so on. Dallas Willard describes this as follows. He says that in the hierarchy of abilities, any disruption or malfunction of the higher powers deforms and weakens the lower ones, not the other way around. There is a life higher than natural thoughts and a feeling for which the living being in human nature was made. We were made for a higher level of life, but when our spiritual connectedness broke like a light bulb that's disconnected from its socket, when we got disconnected from our source being God, we remained and retained the potential for being well. But wellness was drained from our lives like power that is drained from a light bulb. And suddenly life became empty and broken. And we lived in so much less. And now we're making rock soup. Now we're going from place to place thinking, well, if only we can add that to my life. If only somebody could bring this thing in. If only this could change, then I'll be better. And we keep on like that little character from the B movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie. But there's this one clip where he's trying to get out a window. And if we could play that real quick. I think... Sometimes life feels like that. It's going to go better. Maybe this time. Maybe if I get this. Maybe if this changes. Maybe if that changes. And it's like there's this invisible shield between the life we have and the life we want. And we just never get there. We just never make our way through. See, and the fact is that the rock fell, but the rock didn't just fall. It got worse and worse and worse and worse. If we continue the story, it comes to the fact that we are not only lost wellness, but we are fundamentally unwell. If you've ever seen a pothole in the road, you'll know that that pothole was started by a small little imperfection. It was a little less perfect than what it was supposed to be. And what happened was that little imperfection was driven over. And every time it was driven over, then it became a little more imperfect. And then some water fell in there. And then the water was splashed out. And a little rock started moving around. And the small little imperfection became a big imperfection. And the same is true for our wellness. A little unresolved issue becomes a big issue. And I can see everybody that's married says, yes, amen. Because it's those little things that we don't deal with. It's those little issues that we don't come through. And then before we know it, the little issue has become a big issue. And that's the story of humanity, is the little issues of our unwellness. Unwellness erodes, unwellness escalates. And the more we allow unwellness in our lives, the more unwellness causes unwellness. You've seen this in other people's lives. You've seen how somebody allows one wrong in their lives and that wrong starts escalating, and before you know it, they're in trouble at work, and their trouble at work causes trouble at home, and their trouble at home causes trouble in their health, and their trouble in their health causes trouble in every facet of their lives. That's what unwellness does. It escalates. And if you look at all of humanity together, you see how unwellness is causing unwellness, because one unwellness, misery loves company. And one person's brokenness is portrayed upon another, and one broken person deals with another in a broken way. And guess what? Broken people break people. And suddenly we find ourselves in an unwell society that like those little holes in the side of a rock. Have you ever seen one of those round holes in a windy place, in a sandy rock, where there was one small little hole and there was a little rock inside, and then the wind over here blew that little rock and it spun in little circles, and now there's a big hole where there was just a little rock many years ago. And sometimes our lives look like a piece of Swiss cheese, full of holes, full of unwellness. See, when Jesus makes the statement on the cross, or just before the cross, where he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, in Luke chapter 23, verse 34, he isn't merely making a statement. He isn't merely saying, Lord, forgive these individuals around me that is crucifying me, for they know not what they do. He's making a statement about all of humanity. Lord, forgive them, for in their brokenness they break others, and they know not what they do, for they are so wrapped up in their brokenness that breaking others is all they know what to do. Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. It's not a very encouraging story thus far. But it's about to change. Because the reality is, if you look at the overview of this process, if you look at how we've gone from starting out well to losing that wellness to being in a place of being unwell, you'll see that the story doesn't end here, because our wellness is restored. We become well again. There is a cornerstone that is placed in place of our brokenness, that reminds us of the fact that we are chips off the old block, that reminds us of the fact that we are indeed of the God kind. Jesus Christ, our cornerstone that was rejected, has become the chief cornerstone again. And I want to tell you, even if you find your life, if you find yourself in a space where you can associate with this light bulb that has been switched off. This is an image of a light bulb that is being switched off, taken on a slow motion camera. And what happens at a split second is being drawn out to a couple of minutes. But I fear that there are some of us that can associate with this light bulb. I fear that there are some of us that feels as if our lives are lives where the light is slowly fading, the erosion is slowly taking over our very being, and increasingly we're feeling less and less well, more and more disconnected from the source of life. But it doesn't end there. Christ came to come and take the light bulb and reconnect you to your source, to come and take the decay and the brokenness of being unwell in every one of those different facets. Christ came to come and restore that, to come and put you back together again. I love how the Message phrases this in the book of Acts, and to create a bit of context for you here, Acts chapter 4, a man was just healed by the apostles, and when that man is healed and restored, they're challenged before the council, and this is their defense. This is what they say in their own defense. They say, I'll be completely frank with you, Acts chapter 4 verse 10, we have nothing to hide. By the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, the one you killed on the cross, the one God raised from the dead, by means of his name, this man stands before you healthy and whole. Can I tell you that there is one name in heaven and on earth? There is one way in which those who are broken, in which those who are unwell can be restored and made whole again. It is the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And by his name, we can be healthy and whole. And maybe you're in a space today that you need to hear that. Maybe you're in a place where you're being overwhelmed by not being healthy, by not being whole, by not finding emotional wellness, by not finding relational wellness. Maybe you're in the midst of a broken relationship. Maybe you're overwhelmed by grief and hopelessness. Can I tell you this day that by the name of this one, there is a core ingredient to your life that when it clicks back into place, every other thing in your life can come back into its place again. By the name of this one. And then they go on and they say, Jesus is the stone you masons threw out, which is now the cornerstone. Salvation comes no other way. No other name has or will be given by which we can be saved. Only this one. This one is the one that can restore wholeness. This name is the name by which we can be healthy and whole once more. Why? Because we have been made to be in relationship with Him. We are from Him. And it is only in Him that we are back together. And this is where I'm tempted to preach a whole nother message, but I'm gonna discipline myself. Because, we might just interfere with the celebrations of this afternoon, so I'll discipline myself. And I'll just briefly tell you a little something. I'll just briefly reference something to you. If you look at the picture of the temple being built, then there's this statement, and some of you know I've referenced this before, but it's in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 7. God paints a picture for His people of what He wants to do. And look at this. He says, while you're building the temple, only blocks dressed in the quarry were used, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site while it was being built. So there's this picture when the temple was being built that every rock that was being brought to be built into the temple was a rock that perfectly fitted into its space. It wasn't reshaped. It didn't need a metal tool. It would just fit in perfectly to the space that was prepared for it. And this is the point. There is within every single one of us, there is a God-shaped hole that God and connection to Him fits in perfectly. And nothing else can fill that hole. Nothing else can fill that space. It is perfectly made for that. And not only is there a space in you for God, but there's a space in God for you. And you fit perfectly into that space. And that's what it means to be whole. When that connection takes place, the light bulb gets reconnected to the socket and it becomes alive again. And there is no other way. Now, don't hear me wrong. I know there are real issues out there in this real world. And some of you are struggling with big things that are huge with regards to relational connections, and huge with regards to emotional wellness, and huge with regards to health, and huge with regards to calling and work. I'm not trying to belittle those issues. And I'm not trying to say that they just magically all fall in place when Jesus is in place. But what I am saying is that you can work on those issues till you're blue in your face. Unless Jesus is in place, you'll never fix them. Because you'll never be whole in your core. And it's only when you're whole in your core that you have a foundation from which to build into all those areas. And some of you have been running into this piece of glass going, this time, maybe this time, maybe this time, maybe this time. But because you don't have the core ingredient in place, there is no amount of times of trying that'll fix it. If you don't have the foundation in place, if you don't have the cornerstone in place, you just simply can't build the building. But once that cornerstone is in place, there's a foundation from which you could step into wholeness, from which you could step into fullness. And I believe that what God wants to do is He wants to come and establish that foundation again. Colossians chapter 1, verse 20 in the Message paraphrase reads as follows. It says, not only that, but all the broken and dislocated pieces of the universe, people and things, animals and atoms, get properly fixed and fit together in vibrant harmonies, all because of His death, His blood that was poured down from the cross. May all your pieces, may all your brokenness, may all your shortcomings be perfectly fit together in vibrant harmonies because of His death, because of this spiritual connectedness that is replaced. And I want to pray with you today. If you find yourself in a space where you feel like that light bulb that has gone out, if life has been disconnected in some way in your life, and if you've been trying to achieve wholeness, but you've been running into an invisible barrier, this moment right here, this morning is a moment in time where we have an opportunity, not because of what I do or the words that I say or the place where you're at, but because of what Jesus Christ has done. When this stone that the builders rejected became the chief cornerstone, He became your chief cornerstone. He came so that you might be connected in all these different facets once again. And I don't know where you are experiencing unwellness in your life today, but I know that wherever that might be, the foundation to restoration, the first step to wholeness, the first step to wellness is linking up, is making the spiritual connection, is putting in place the chief cornerstone. And once that is in place, I know that for some of us it's a shorter journey and for some of us it's a longer journey, but it's a journey that we can take if we have the cornerstone in place.